I pulled into my own driveway at 11 p.m. and saw police lights flashing because apparently coming home early from a business trip is now a criminal offense. Picture this. I'm Marcus, 52, construction foreman who just drove 600 meters from Denver. All I want is a beer on my grandfather's dock. Instead, there's some blonde stranger brewing coffee in my kitchen like she's been living there for months. Sir, step away from the vehicle. You're trespassing on private property, Officer Ramirez announces. You hold up my house keys. Officer, this is my property. That's when Constance, or HOA Karen, steps out from behind the squad car with a smirk that could curdle milk. Actually, officer, this man abandoned this property weeks ago. My friend Belle has been legally house-sitting. The cop looks confused. Constance looks triumphant. And I realize I'm about to get arrested for breaking into my own damn house. What would you do if police tried to arrest you in your own driveway? Where are you watching from? Drop your wildest HOA story below. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. My name is Marcus DeCrow, and 3 years ago, I inherited the most beautiful piece of property in Pine Ridge, Montana. 2 acres of lakefront paradise that some California yoga instructor apparently thinks belongs to her now. My grandfather Ezra built this place in 1987 with $47, a pickup truck, and the kind of work ethic they don't make anymore. The man survived the Depression, fought in Korea, and spent 30 years laying railroad track across Montana. When he finally retired, he bought this slice of heaven and built every board of the cabin himself. I'm a construction foreman, divorced, to grown kids, and about as simple as they come. Morning coffee on Ezra's dock, watching eagles fish while mist rises off Pine Ridge Lake. This was my retirement plan. Work construction until 60. Then live quietly by the water where nobody bothers me. That was before Lakewood Vista Estates invaded like a plague of McMansions. In 2019, some California developer bought the adjacent farmland and vomited 47 cookie-cutter houses across what used to be decent pasture. Each monstrosity cost more than I'll make in 15 years, complete with 3-car garages for people who probably never worked a day with their hands. The smell of fresh pine sap from grandfather's trees mixing with chlorine from infinity pools pretty much sums up our cultural differences. Then came Blackwood, the HOA Karen to end all Karens. Picture a 65-year-old former bank manager who drives a white Tesla, wears designer yoga pants to buy milk, and once filed a noise complaint about songbirds disrupting her morning meditation. I'm not making this up. Constance paid $850,000 for the lake lifestyle, then immediately ran for HOA president because controlling other people's lives is apparently her hobby. Her first official act demanding I remove the dock my grandfather built because it disrupts the community views. Ma'am, I said standing on 35-year-old planks. This stick was here when your neighborhood was still cow pasture. She got that pinched look people get when reality contradicts their delusions. Well, I never. The HOA has authority to maintain aesthetic standards. My lawyer explained that riparian rights don't care about HOA feelings, which sent Constance into bureaucratic warfare mode. Suddenly, the county was getting anonymous complaints about my unpermitted structures that predated most building codes by decades. 3 months ago, things get weird. I started noticing lights in my cabin during work trips, mail being redirected, and my garden hose running 24/7 to fill the hot tub next door. Security cameras hidden in a birdhouse caught something that made my blood boil. Some blonde stranger entering my cabin with keys. Meet Belle Winters, 30-something lifestyle consultant from San Francisco, supposedly house-sitting for Constance. Except Constance was very much still in town, and Belle was charging tourists $100 per weekend for authentic lakefront retreats, using me fire pit and lake access. The audacity was breathtaking. This woman was literally running a business out of my grandfather's cabin while I was working construction in other counties. The final straw came when I found Ezra's hand-carved fishing lures scattered across my coffee table like decorations. Those lures, smooth wood worn by decades of his fingers during Montana winters, weren't props for some California con artist Instagram photos. When the county assessor called asking about property transfer paperwork filed by Blackwood, I should have driven straight home. Instead, I focused on the Denver job, 3 weeks guaranteed work. $18,000 badly needed dollars. The morning I left, expensive lavender shampoo lingered in my bathroom like a territorial marking. I packed extra security equipment, asked my neighbor Floyd to keep watch, and figured 3 weeks wouldn't matter. Biggest mistake of my life, apparently. Working for a living now qualifies as property abandonment in Constance's alternative reality. Which brings us back to me standing in my own driveway at 11 p.m., holding house keys while police treat me like a criminal and some stranger drinks coffee in my kitchen. Sometimes I wonder if Ezra is rolling over in his grave, watching his grandson get outsmarted by a yoga instructor and a suburban dictator with too much time and money. Standing in my driveway with police lights painting everything red and blue, I watched this surreal nightmare unfold like my own personal episode of Cops. Officer Ramirez ran my ID, while Officer Bennett, clearly the veteran who'd seen every flavor of suburban drama, examined my deed and tax records with the expression of a man questioning his career choices. "Sir, your documentation appears legitimate," Bennett said, shooting Constance a look that could freeze beer in July. "You are the legal owner of this property." I remembered my lawyer explaining during our dock dispute that squatters' rights in Montana require continuous occupation for at least 5 years, not 12 days. Which meant Constance had gotten her legal education from the same place. She probably learned home decorating, Pinterest, and delusion. Her story started crumbling faster than week-old cookies as Bennett interrupted her rambling about community liability with the patience of a saint. "Ma'am, you have zero authority over private property outside HOA boundaries." That's when Belle made her Oscar-worthy entrance, emerging from my cabin in silk pajamas that probably cost more than my trick payment, clutching my late wife's favorite coffee mug, the blue ceramic one with the chip on the handle that Sarah used every morning for 15 years. The sight of this stranger holding Sarah's memory in her manicured hands made my vision blur with rage, but I forced myself to stay calm as she produced tears that would make a soap opera director weep. With professional jealousy, "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man has been terrorizing me for weeks while I've been legally caring for this abandoned property under a lease agreement." The audacity was breathtaking. She actually produced official-looking paperwork complete with my forged signature and a backdated timeline showing 6 months of occupancy. The kind of professional con job that spoke to serious preparation and criminal experience. The smell of her expensive lavender perfume, mixing with my cabin's familiar cedar scent, created this nauseating cocktail of violation that made my stomach churn, especially when Officer Bennett asked for her identification and she replied with the classic con artist dodge. "Oh, I left it inside during all this chaos. Time for my counterpunch." I pulled out my phone with fingers steady despite the adrenaline and showed the officer security footage with crystal clear our timestamps, proving her first entry occurred 3 days after I left for Denver. Breaking and entering captured and beautiful. For K resolution that made Belle's California tan go pale as Montana snow. But Constance wasn't finished playing her cards, producing a manila folder thick enough to stop bullets and crammed with noise complaints, property violations, and photos of my allegedly offensive vegetable garden while declaring with community theater villain flair that I threatened their entire peaceful community. I almost laughed, remembering our actual conversation where my exact words recorded on my phone were, "Lady, you'll regret messing with a working man's retirement dream." Apparently, Constance's internal translation of crucial that separated real police work from TV drama. Belle's official lease was printed on Constance's personal letterhead, a detail that made him ask directly, "Ma'am, are you this woke converts reasonable warnings into terrorist threats?" Officer Bennett noticed something man's landlord, which caused Constance to stammer like a car engine dying in winter before Bennett shut down her authority claims. With brutal finality, the radio static crackled as officers ran background checks, while Belle demanded 24 hours to gather belongings, and Officer Ramirez, clearly unimpressed by her performance, countered with 2 hours instead. Constance hissed, "This isn't over." As squad cars prepared to leave, and I replied, looking forward to that conversation, tasting the first hint of victory since this nightmare began. But victory proved premature when I caught them whispering by the property line about Plan B and moving faster than expected. The business card wedged in my doorframe hit like a punch to the gut. Bio Winters, lifestyle consultant and property acquisition specialist with handwritten notation. Adverse possession successful in 47 states. Consultation 500. My blood turned ice cold realizing this wasn't amateur hour, but professional theft disguised as property management, confirmed by my quick inventory revealing missing spare keys, property survey documents, grandfather's tackle box, expertly tampered security system with surgically removed SD card, and most chilling, utility bills in Belle's name dated for months ago. Impossible since she'd supposedly just arrived. At 1 a.m., Floyd knocked with glowing cell phone footage shot from his kitchen window 20 minutes after police departure, showing Constance and Belle loading boxes into the Tesla alongside a third figure, man in expensive business suit with California lawyer plates clearly visible. "Son," Floyd said, His weathered face granite serious in the porch light. This wasn't random squatting. This was a coordinated attack. The bitter taste of realization settled in my mouth as I understood. I wasn't fighting petty HOA politics anymore. I was fighting organized crime. The next morning, I discovered Belle hadn't just been squatting. She'd been running a goddamn criminal empire out of my grandfather's cabin. The shed behind the house had been transformed into a professional massage parlor, complete with imported essential oil diffusers and a hand-painted sign reading Sacred Healing Space. 6 weeks of online reviews showed she'd charge desperate city folks $300 per night for authentic lakefront wellness retreats, using my dock for yoga sessions, my fire pit for meditation circles, and my vegetable garden as a farm-to-table dining experience. But the real gut punch came with my electric bill, $847 for 1 month. The humming I'd attributed to an aging furnace was actually cryptocurrency mining equipment she'd installed in my basement, sucking enough power to light up downtown Pinneridge. My lawyer had mentioned during our initial consultation that utility fraud crossing state lines becomes a federal crime, which meant this California con artist had just handed federal prosecutors a gift-wrapped felony charge. Water usage told an equally infuriating story. 300% above normal thanks to her hot tub operation and sacred cleansing ceremonies that apparently required enough water to baptize half of Montana. Constance launched her counterattack like a woman possessed, filing 47 separate complaints designed to bury me in bureaucratic quicksand. County code enforcement received reports about my unlicensed commercial operation, using Belle's illegal activities as evidence against me. The health department got anonymous tips about unsanitary conditions threatening community water supply. Most vicious of all, she called my construction company, claiming I was an unreliable contractor with serious property disputes, trying to destroy my livelihood while stealing my home. My deep dive into Belle's background revealed a pattern more chilling than any Stephen King novel. This woman had pulled identical scams across Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona, always targeting isolated men with valuable properties, always partnering with local power players to create legitimacy. Previous victims had lost properties worth millions not through legal defeat, but through financial exhaustion. They simply couldn't afford to fight well-funded criminal organizations in court. For years, Deputy Jake's license plate search opened Pandora's box. The mysterious business suit from our midnight surveillance belonged to Clayton Morse, a California attorney whose website read like a how-to guide for property theft, adverse possession consulting, squatters' rights advocacy, client testimonials boasting about acquiring million-dollar cabins for legal fees. One review made my blood freeze. Clayton helped me acquire a 2.3 meters Tahoe property for just $5,000 in legal cost. These weren't opportunistic criminals. They were professionals. Hidden behind my bathroom mirror, I found documents that proved premeditation going back months. A property appraisal commissioned by Lakewood Vista Holdings LLC, Constance's husband's shell company, valued my land at $1.8 million with specific notes about acquiring adjacent private parcel. To maximize HOA development potential, they'd been planning to steal my inheritance while I was still working construction. Totally oblivious to the target painted on my back, the counterattack required serious firepower, professional security system with cloud backup, new locks wanting writhing, motion sensors protecting the dock and shed, and a call to my insurance company that revealed another crime. Someone had filed a bogus damage claim using my policy number. My property attorney confirmed what I'd hoped. 30-plus years of continuous ownership, regular tax payments, and clear title made my legal position nearly bulletproof. But fighting these criminals would require federal intervention and serious money. Community support materialized faster than I'd expected. Floyd's word-of-mouth campaign among longtime residents sparked offers of help from hardware store owner Dolores, retired forest ranger Big Jim, and town barber S, who casually mentioned 3 other properties in neighboring counties hit by similar schemes. The sound of diesel trucks dumping gravel announced Constance's latest move, hiring landscapers to improve property line visibility, which really meant establishing better surveillance of my daily routines. Her 10 p.m. phone call dripped with false concern. Marcus, you're making this harder than necessary. Accept our settlement before legal fees destroy you financially. She'd clearly researched my vulnerabilities, mentioning my ex-wife's medical debt and my daughter's college loans with surgical precision, then implying she had connections who could eliminate my construction work entirely. Every word got recorded, since Montana allows one-party consent, and her threats would make beautiful evidence for any prosecutor willing to listen. The bureaucratic warfare peaked with official notice of a county hearing about unpermitted commercial activity, 47 separate complaints requiring documentation, legal responses, and potentially $75,000 in attorney fees. Classic death by paperwork. Strategy designed to force surrender through financial exhaustion rather than legal defeat. As I read through the complaints, many citing Bell's own illegal activities as evidence against me, I realized these people weren't just stealing property. They were weaponizing the entire legal system. The taste of anger mixed with morning coffee as I understood the full scope of their operation. This wasn't about my cabin anymore. This was about whether working Americans could own property without being destroyed by criminals, with enough money to corrupt the system itself. The county hearing felt like stepping into a legal execution chamber designed by people who bill for $100 per hour just to breathe. I'd expected a simple administrative review, but found Constance commanding a legal army that probably cost more than my annual salary, while Attorney Mars unveiled a 40-page PowerPoint presentation about community impact that looked like he'd been preparing for months. 3 neighbors I'd never seen before sat ready to lie under oath about my alleged threats, and the overwhelmed hearing officer's expression screamed, "Why didn't I become a dentist instead?" Bell's Oscar-worthy performance as traumatized victim would have been hilarious if my future wasn't hanging in balance. She claimed I'd violently evicted her from her legal residence, produced fake medical records documenting PTSD from our confrontation, and demanded $25,000 in compensation while dabbing her eyes with tissues that probably cost more than my lunch. The photos of damaged personal property were actually items she'd stolen from my cabin, but her delivery was so convincing, I almost felt guilty for existing. Her expensive perfume mixed with the musty hearing room air reminded me of that first violation, how she contaminated my grandfather's sanctuary with her criminal presence. Morse's twisted genius involved weaponizing Bell's own crimes against me. He presented documentation of cryptocurrency mining, wellness retreats, and massage operations as proof I was knowingly operating unlicensed commercial enterprises on residential property. I remembered my first lawyer consultation years ago when he mentioned that property owners can be held liable for tenant activities, even when completely unaware. These criminals were using their own illegal businesses to frame me for violations I never knew existed. The logic was so backward it made my brain hurt. Break into someone's property, commit crimes, then blame the owner for allowing it. My evidence arsenal came out swinging with security footage, timestamps proving Bell's break-in, recorded threats from Constance, utility fraud documentation, and a conspiracy timeline that read like a crime novel. The hearing officer's demeanor shifted faster than Montana weather, as he realized this wasn't administrative paperwork, but potential federal crimes. "This appears to involve criminal activity requiring law enforcement intervention," he announced, sending Morse into damage control mode that reeked of desperation and expensive cologne. The Morse had saved his nuclear option for last. He claimed my property had been illegally subdivided in 1987, meaning Ezra never had the right to build a cabin on agricultural land, and presented fabricated historical documents suggesting the property should revert to county ownership for tax auction, where HOA could purchase it for pennies. The manufactured paper trail was sophisticated enough to take months and tens of thousands to disprove, assuming I lived long enough to fight it. Suddenly, I heard Ezra's voice from childhood telling stories about corrupt officials trying to cheat honest working men, how he'd kept every receipt and document because you can't trust bureaucrats as far as you can throw them. Floyd's basement, transformed in a Pentagon level, were planning that evening, complete with whiteboards mapping legal strategies, county records, and a coffee pot that hadn't stopped brewing since the crisis began. Big Jim volunteered for historical research while Dolores offered free copying services and meeting space at the hardware store. Retired Judge Miriam appeared like a guardian angel, explaining that Montana's color of title doctrine protects good faith property owners who've paid taxes continuously for decades, something these California criminals clearly hadn't researched thoroughly enough. Constance's character assassination campaign escalated beyond petty neighborhood gossip into systematic reputation destruction designed to isolate me from community support. She spread rumors about my mental stability to anyone who'd listen, contacted my ex-wife with fabricated stories about dangerous behavior, filed complaints with state licensing boards, and launched social media attacks claiming I exhibited predatory conduct toward women. The woman was trying to destroy my life one lie at a time while her partner attempted murder. By legal fees, physical warfare replaced legal subtlety when my truck tires got slashed at the construction site. Security footage clearly showing a rental car matching descriptions from our midnight surveillance. Anonymous OSHA complaints multiplied like cancer. Fake online reviews claimed my work was dangerous, and municipal contracts faced cancellation threats if my employer continued associating with the problematous individual. They were systematically dismantling my economic foundation while bleeding me dry in court. Classic organized crime tactics wrapped in suburban respectability. The final escalation arrived at 2 a.m. when motion sensors detected 3 figures approaching my cabin with gasoline cans. Their intent crystal clear in the security footage that captured faces detailed enough for criminal prosecution. They fled when Floyd's emergency call brought sheriff's deputies racing down my driveway. But the message was unmistakable: surrender your property or burn with it. Standing in my driveway watching deputies process evidence of attempted arson, I finally understood the true scope of their operation. These weren't just property thieves anymore. They were potential murderers willing to commit any crime necessary to protect their criminal enterprise. The taste of fear mixed with rage as I realized tomorrow's newspaper could have featured my obituary instead of my legal victory. The breakthrough came from an 80-year-old man with shaking hands and a memory sharp enough to cut glass. Big Jim had tracked down Pete Kowalski, the original surveyor from 1987, living in a trailer park 20 meters away with a shoebox full of secrets that would turn this whole nightmare upside down. Your grandfather was one hell of a good man, Pete wheezed, settling into Floyd's basement with the careful movements of someone whose bones had survived 8 Montana winters too many. Paid me in cash and homemade venison jerky, treated him like family instead of hired help. But that December survey was a real bastard. Compass went haywire during the worst snowstorm I'd ever seen. And I made an error that's been eating at me for 35 years. The error wasn't small change. Pete's personal notes, written in pencil that had faded but remained legible, showed the actual property line ran 60 feet further east than officially recorded, meaning my family owned 3.2 acres of prime lakefront instead of the 2 acres we'd been paying taxes on. More delicious than Christmas morning. This meant I legally own land currently occupied by 3 McMansions worth over $6 million. Combined, Constance's precious infinity pool, the $400,000 monument to her superiority, sat entirely on property that belonged to me. The irony tasted sweeter than my grandmother's apple pie. FBI agent Sarah Bennett arrived from Billings the next morning, carrying news that made my head spin and my heart race simultaneously. Morse's operation was under federal investigation for an interstate crime spree, involving 47 properties across 12 states with damages exceeding $18 million. Belle's real name was Bethany Walsh, wanted in Nevada for identical real estate fraud, and her abandoned laptop read like a criminal's business plan. Spreadsheets listing 23 target properties across 3 states with my cabin marked priority 1. To 0.1 meter settlement potential communications between her and Constance dated back 14 months, proving they'd been hunting me like predators stalking wounded prey long before I knew I was in their crosshairs. The conspiracy ran deeper than a Montana copper mine. Bank records revealed Constance had paid Moore $75,000 in consultation fees 6 months before my Denver trip, hired private investigators to research my work schedule and financial vulnerabilities, and her husband had secretly filed permits for community lake access through shell companies designed to steal my waterfront. Most infuriating, they'd attempted to purchase my property outright through fraudulent lowball offers, trying to buy nearly $2 million worth of land for $200,000 while keeping me completely ignorant of its true value. Agent Bennett explained their victim selection process with the cold precision of a pathologist describing cancer. They targeted isolated men with valuable rural properties and limited family support, specifically choosing people who couldn't afford prolonged legal warfare against well-funded criminal organizations. Constance had been recruited as their community insider because HOA authority provided respectability, while her banking background offered financial expertise. The entire strategy depended on victims surrendering through financial exhaustion rather than fighting court battles designed to bankrupt ordinary working Americans. I'd read about federal RICO prosecutions during lunch breaks, never imagining they'd apply to my life. But Agent Bennett confirmed that interstate fraud schemes involving mail and wire communications carry 20-year mandatory minimums for enterprise leaders. When she offered witness protection, I laughed and told her California criminals weren't driving me from Ezra's land. So, we compromised on FBI surveillance and a panic button that would bring federal cavalry running if these psychopaths decided murder was easier than legal theft. Everything flipped when Bennett served federal subpoenas, while local news crews captured Constance's perp walk in handcuffs. Belle got arrested on Nevada warrants. Constance's husband faced bank fraud charges, and suddenly my phone rang with an attorney representing HOA homeowners wanting to discuss a generous settlement in your favor. The taste of victory mixed with morning coffee as I realized the predators had become prey. But the real war was just beginning. Floyd's basement looked like the CIA had exploded inside a small town. hardware store with whiteboards covering every wall, red string connecting photos of criminals, and enough coffee brewing to fuel a NASA lunch. My daughter Emma arrived from Seattle carrying law school textbooks and the kind of fury that only comes from watching criminals try to steal your father's legacy, Dad. These picked the wrong family, she announced, dumping legal documents across Floyd's kitchen table, while Big Jim created crime timelines with obsessive precision, and retired Judge Miriam dispensed wisdom between bites of apple pie that tasted like sweet revenge. Emma broke down the legal strategy in construction worker terms I could actually understand. We'd file something called a quiet title action that would prove my ownership so completely that no criminal organization could ever challenge it again. The federal prosecutor offered immunity for my cooperation as star witness, which felt like winning the lottery since I'd been their victim anyway. Our battle plan had two weapons: demand immediate removal of illegal structures built on my land, or seek damages for unlawful occupation at $500 per day for 3 years, totaling over $500,000 that would come straight out of their criminal profits. Dolores transformed her hardware store into our evidence processing center, running industrial copying machines around the clock, while dispensing coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Security footage became a chronological crime movie showing every illegal act these criminals had committed. Audio recordings of Constance's threats got enhanced to capture every incriminating syllable, and financial records revealed money trails connecting conspirators across 4 states. The smell of fresh copies mixed with lumber and paint created this uniquely American atmosphere of ordinary people fighting back against sophisticated corruption. Local reporter Jana Mills recognized this story was bigger than church bake sales and county fair coverage, connecting our case to similar property thefts across rural Montana that painted a disturbing pattern of organized crime targeting working Americans. Veterans groups embraced our fight as symbolic of rural values under attack, while social media campaigns spread out property rights. Now hashtags across Facebook groups from Billings to Bozeman. My personal nightmare was becoming a rallying cry for anyone who'd ever been bullied by people with more money than morals. The legal education continued as Emma explained concepts that would soon become my vocabulary. I remembered reading about adverse possession cases during lunch breaks at construction sites, never imagining it would apply to my life. But apparently criminals need hostile, open, notorious, continuous, and exclusive occupation for 5+ years, not 12 days of breaking and entering. Montana's color of title laws protect honest property owners who pay taxes regularly, creating legal presumptions that favor truth over criminal creativity. Most satisfying, our ICO prosecutions for mail fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering carry 20-year sentences each, meaning these criminals face potential life imprisonment for their greed. Community support exploded beyond anything I'd expected. The Pinneridge Property Rights Committee grew from Floyd's basement to 47 members, who packed Dolores' store every evening, organizing boycotts against contractors working with Constance's criminal organization while pledging financial support for my legal battle. Local businesses refused service to anyone connected with the conspiracy, while county commissioners publicly condemned property fraud affecting rural constituents. State legislators introduced protective bills, transforming my case into a legislative movement across Montana. Money appeared from sources I'd never imagined. Veterans legal funds contributed $25,000, while a GoFund campaign raised $67,000 from rural property owners nationwide who understood these criminals threatened every American's right to own land. Pinneridge Credit Union offered interest-free loans, but best of all, a contingency attorney took the case based on evidence strength, meaning I could fight without risking financial suicide. The taste of hope mixed with morning coffee as I realized David might actually beat Goliath this time. Judge Miriam prepared me psychologically for courtroom warfare with advice earned through decades of legal battles. Justice comes from facts presented clearly to people who know right from wrong, not from anger or revenge fantasies. Emma drilled deposition techniques, while Big Jim shared depression wisdom. Your grandfather survived economic collapse in Hitler's war. You can handle some California con artist with law degrees and attitude problems. Federal investigation expanded into a multi-state probe involving corrupt officials, fraudulent records, and systematic targeting of rural Americans by criminal enterprises disguised as legitimate businesses. Bank evidence showed Constance received $125,000 in recruitment fees for delivering me as a target, while property documents revealed suspicious survey errors across 3 states that consistently benefited developers over long-time residents. Grand jury subpoenas numbered 23, and growing as prosecutors discovered the true scope of this criminal conspiracy. Security sweeps found surveillance equipment and planted around my property, by private investigators hired to monitor my routines illegally. Phone records proved Morse's firm had intercepted communications without warrants, while electronic evidence documented systematic constitutional violations. By criminals pretending to be respectable business people, their operation wasn't simple theft, but organized warfare against rural Americans who supposedly lacked resources to fight back effectively. Settlement offers arrived like desperate peace treaties from losing armies. 500,000 from Constance's team, 200,000 from the HOA board, 1.2 million from Morse's firm with non-disclosure demands. My response, coordinated with federal prosecutors, was beautifully simple. See you in federal court, criminals. Bring your toothbrushes. Desperation makes criminals stupid. And these California con artists proved that theory perfectly when my truck tires got slashed for the third time in 2 weeks at the same construction site where security cameras captured their rental car. Like amateur art crime school, state licensing boards received anonymous complaints claiming I exhibited workplace safety violations and erratic behavior patterns that would make a serial killer blush, while my construction company faced legal threats demanding my termination or lawsuits for enabling criminal conduct. Municipal contracts suddenly required background checks that hadn't existed since the Carter administration, and I realized these people were betting they could destroy my livelihood faster than federal prosecutors could save it. Bell transformed Nevada County Jail into criminal headquarters, coordinating revenge campaigns through accomplices with unlimited social media access and the moral compass of hungry sharks. Fake accounts posted my photo on predator websites with fabricated harassment stories, while doctored audio recordings suggested I'd made racist comments about California immigrants during wellness retreats that never happened. The character assassination spread faster than gossip at a church bollock, reaching my adult children's employers and my ex-wife's social circles with lies designed to destroy relationships I built over decades. Co-workers at job sites suddenly avoided eye contact while diesel fuel fumes mixed with the acrid smell of burning reputation. Constance's legal masterstroke came disguised as victim protection, an emergency restraining order claiming I'd stalked and threatened her, based on witness statements from neighbors who'd never spoken to me in their lives. The brilliant trap prohibited me from approaching HOA properties, which included my own lakefront since our boundaries touched, meaning I couldn't access my dock or waterfront without facing arrest for contempt. If I obeyed the order, I'd lose access to my own property, but if I ignored it, I'd destroy my credibility as a federal witness while handing prosecutors a reason to abandon my case entirely. Midnight terrorism escalated beyond vandalism into systematic destruction designed to break my spirit one chain socket at a time. My grandfather's dock suffered professional sabotage that would cost thousands to repair. 30-year-old fruit trees died from herbicide poisoning that eliminated decades of family memories, and cabin windows exploded from pellet gun sniper attacks launched from neighboring tree lines. Security cameras captured masked figures, but identifying them proved impossible when they operated from HOA property I couldn't legally access thanks to restraining orders. The sound of chainsaws at 3 a.m. became my new alarm clock, while the smell of dying apple blossoms reminded me daily that these criminals were murdering my family's legacy one tree at a time. Morse's legal terrorism multiplied like a virus, designed to bankrupt me through paperwork rather than bullets. He filed motions claiming my quiet title action was frivolous litigation, deserving court sanctions and attorney fees, demanding I pay their legal cost for defending against my baseless ownership claims, while simultaneously suing me for violating their privacy rights through evidence gathering. I remembered reading about lawfare tactics during lunch breaks, using the legal system as a weapon to exhaust opponents financially rather than proving innocence in court. Each motion required expensive responses that threatened six-figure legal bills before we ever reached trial, and every filing felt like another shovel full of dirt on my financial grave. Professional assassination reached levels that would impress the mafia when anonymous OSHA complaints targeted every construction site where I worked, forcing expensive inspections and work stoppages that made my presence toxic to employers. Fake online reviews describing my work as dangerous and unprofessional appeared overnight across platforms, while municipal contracts suddenly included character clauses that made employing me liability for any company. Union pension eligibility faced questioning due to pending legal issues, and workers' compensation claims got delayed pending background investing that felt more like inquisitions than administrative reviews. FBI surveillance teams documented each retaliation for federal obstruction charges, while Agent Bennett reminded me these criminals were building their own prison sentences with every illegal move. Wiretaps captured Morse coordinating witness intimidation through private investigators who'd been watching my daily routines for months, and federal marshals provided informal security that attracted media attention, turning my nightmare into public entertainment for people who'd never faced organized crime. In their living rooms, community supporters became collateral damage and warfare designed to isolate me from local help. Floyd received death threats warning him to stop helping your neighbor. Big Jim's truck got vandalized outside the post office, and Dolores faced false health department complaints about her hardware store's unsanitary conditions. The message was crystal clear. Anyone supporting Marcus Delqua would face systematic harassment until they abandoned him to fight alone against unlimited criminal resources. The psychological warfare hit where it hurt most when Morris's team weaponized my divorce records, contacting my ex-wife with fabricated stories about dangerous behavior while threatening child protective services involvement regarding my relationships with adult children. They discovered that attacking family caused more pain than financial ruin, so they targeted my deepest fears about losing connections with people I loved most. The taste of pure rage mixed with morning coffee as I understood these sociopaths would destroy anyone in their path to protect their criminal empire. Then came the night that changed everything. Security alarms screamed at 2 a.m. as cameras captured 3 masked arsonists approaching my cabin with gasoline cans, their intent unmistakable in high-definition footage that would soon become federal evidence. They fled when sirens announced sheriff response, but left behind proof these criminals had abandoned legal warfare for attempted murder against federal witnesses. The arson attempt transformed my case from property dispute into attempted murder, bringing federal crime scene teams with equipment that turned my driveway into something resembling a CSI episode. Fire marshals confirmed gasoline residue and professional accelerant placement patterns that screamed organized crime rather than amateur vandalism, while DNA evidence from discarded gloves identified 3 suspects through facial recognition software that connected them to Morse's security consulting firm. FBI agent Bennett's expression went from concerned to furious as she realized these criminals had escalated from property theft to potential homicide against a federal witness, adding arson conspiracy to an indictment that already promised decades in prison. Federal witness protection became non-negotiable after Bennett discovered communications between Morse and his hired muscle discussing permanent solutions to their Marcus problem. Safe house arrangements in Missoula would keep me alive until trial, but I refused to abandon grandfather's land to California criminals who had already stolen too much from too many people. Our compromise involved 24-hour FBI surveillance, panic buttons connected directly to federal response teams, and enough security equipment to protect a small embassy. The taste of defiance mixed with morning coffee as I realized survival meant becoming a prisoner on my own property. But these bastards wouldn't drive me from land my family had owned for 35 years. Constance's final desperate gambit involved an emergency HOA meeting disguised as community safety crisis management, but really designed to raise money for continued warfare against federal investigations. She claimed I was a domestic terrorist threatening peaceful residents with violence and property destruction, producing fabricated evidence of threatening phone calls and mysterious vandalism that somehow blamed me for crimes committed against my own property. The special assessment vote demanded $300, zero from homeowners to hire private security firms that would protect the community from their dangerous neighbor, who dared to fight back against organized crime. Media warfare escalated into full-scale propaganda campaigns when Morse's public relations firm launched coordinated attacks across regional newspapers, radio stations, and social media platforms. Paid advertisements portrayed me as a dangerous loner with grudges against successful neighbors, while fake grassroots organizations called Protect Lakewood Vista Families spread fear about unstable veterans threatening community safety. Jana Mills countered by exposing the PR firm's connections to previous fraud cases across multiple states, revealing a pattern of victim blaming that accompanied every property theft operation these criminals had attempted. Political pressure reached state-level corruption when county commissioners received orchestrated complaints about law enforcement bias favoring rural criminals over law-abiding suburban residents. State legislators found themselves lobbied by concerned constituents claiming federal resources were being wasted on trivial property disputes rather than real crimes, while sheriff departments faced budget threats if they continued cooperating with federal investigations. The message was clear: make Marcus' case too expensive and controversial to pursue, forcing prosecutors to abandon their star witness rather than face political consequences. Economic warfare targeted every aspect of my financial survival with surgical precision that would impress military strategists. My construction company lost 3 major contracts after anonymous safety concerns reached municipal officials, bank Representatives question mortgage eligibility due to pending legal complications. And insurance companies threaten policy cancellations over high-rises property situations. The systematic destruction of my economic foundation continued while legal battles drained resources, creating perfect conditions for forced surrender through financial exhaustion rather than legal death. Community civil war erupted as peonage. Residents chose sides between longtime locals supporting property rights and newer arrivals fearing property value destruction. Town council meetings devolved into shouting matches between Justice for Marcus and community safety first factions, while local businesses lost customers as boycotts targeted both my supporters and HOA sympathizers. School board meetings faced disruption from parents arguing about what kind of community we want our children to inherit, turning my personal nightmare into a philosophical battle about American values versus suburban conformity. Federal grand jury returned a 47-count indictment that read like organized crime prosecution rather than simple property fraud, charging Morse, Bell, and 8 co-conspirators with RICO conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and witness intimidation. Asset forfeit orders froze $3 to $2 million in accounts linked to their property theft enterprise, while Constance received designation as unindicted co-conspirator pending cooperation agreements with federal prosecutors. Computer forensics from FBI searches revealed victim targeting databases with detailed financial profiles spanning 12 states and millions in stolen property. The plea bargain avalanche began when faced with potential life sentences under federal guidelines. Morse's attorney approached prosecutors seeking cooperation deals. Bell offered testimony against the entire network in exchange for reduced prison time, and 3 co-conspirators accepted plea agreements rather than face trial. Constance's legal position became increasingly desperate as evidence mounted, proving her central role in recruiting victims and coordinating local aspects of the criminal conspiracy. HOA infrastructure collapsed under federal investigation pressure when 3 board members resigned, rather than face potential criminal liability. Homeowners revolted against special assessments funding legal warfare. Property management companies terminated contracts citing reputational risks, and insurance carriers canceled liability policies due to criminal activity exclusions. The community that had once threatened my existence was disintegrating under the weight of crimes committed in their name by people they trusted with their money and authority. My personal toll mounted despite approaching victory as stress-induced weight, loss, chronic insomnia, and constant security concerns strained relationships with adult children who feared for my safety. Construction work suffered as legal proceedings demanded attention, and I seriously considered selling everything just to escape communities torn apart by conflicts I'd never wanted. Then, federal marshals arrested Constance at dawn on witness intimidation charges, and suddenly, the tide turned completely. The federal courthouse steps and Billings transformed into a media circus that would make Hollywood jealous when United States remorse finally reached trial day. 12 news vans lined the street while protesters from both sides created a carnival atmosphere. Property rights advocates waving Justice for Marcus signs faced off against HOA. Supporters holding community safety first banners, with national media capturing every dramatic moment for evening broadcast. I arrived surrounded by FBI agents and local supporters who'd driven 3 hours to witness justice, while Constance's per-walk footage played on courthouse lobby televisions. As jury selection began for the most significant property rights case Montana had seen in decades, the packed gallery resembled a small-town civil war with Marcus supporters filling the left side and HOA residents occupying the right, separated by federal marshals who'd seen enough courtroom drama to recognize potential violence when wealthy criminals faced accountability. Federal prosecutor Sarah Williams opened with timeline graphics showing the conspiracy scope across 12 states and 47 properties, while defense attorneys claimed this was merely an innocent business dispute blown out of proportion by an unstable veteran with persecution complexes. Key evidence included recorded phone calls of conspiracy planning that made the jury visibly uncomfortable as they heard criminals casually discussing destroying working families for profit. My testimony began with direct examination that felt like reliving every nightmare these criminals had inflicted on my family. Williams guided me through the timeline using security footage that showed Bell's break-in with crystal clarity, while my voice cracked, describing the violation of finding strangers using my late wife's coffee mug and grandfather's fishing lures as decorations for illegal business operations. The jury's expressions shifted from skeptical to sympathetic to outright angry, as evidence mounted showing systematic targeting of rural Americans by sophisticated criminal organizations disguised as legitimate businesses. Cross-examination attacked My character with desperate fury, as defense attorneys painted me as a paranoid veteran with anger management issues who'd overreacted to innocent misunderstandings about property boundaries. They attempted to introduce irrelevant divorce records and employment disputes, while suggesting my security measures proved mental instability rather than reasonable precautions against criminal harassment. My response stayed calm and factual. Sir, I just wanted to come home to my own property without finding criminals operating the legal businesses in my grandfather's cabin, which resonated powerfully with jurors who understood the fundamental violation these criminals had committed. Constance's dramatic testimony as prosecution witness created the trial's most explosive moment, when she broke down crying while admitting accepting $125,000 to help target me for property theft. She described pressure from her husband about HOA property values and promises from Morris that rural people couldn't afford to fight sophisticated legal warfare, revealing the classist assumptions underlying their victim selection process. Her admission that I'd researched my work schedule, financial vulnerabilities, and family relationships for over a year proved premeditation. That destroyed any remaining defense credibility. FBI agent Bennett's technical testimony explained the interstate conspiracy using charts and financial records that traced money laundering through multiple shell companies across 4 states. Computer forensic specialists detailed digital evidence showing victim targeting databases with detailed profiles of vulnerable property owners, while bank fraud experts calculated total damages of $14.7 million across all victims. The scope of their criminal enterprise stunned jurors who'd expected a simple property dispute rather than organized crime prosecution that belonged in mafia trials. Defense collapse accelerated when 2 co-defendants changed plea mid-trial rather than face cross-examination about their roles in witness intimidation and property fraud. Morris refused plea deals with characteristic arrogance, apparently believing California legal credentials would impress Montana jurors more than evidence of systematic criminal behavior targeting rural Americans. His attorney's closing argument claimed property disputes belonged in civil court rather than federal criminal prosecution. But the damage was irreversible after weeks of evidence showing organized conspiracy to defraud vulnerable victims. The verdict arrived after 4 hours of deliberation that felt like 4 years. Guilty on all 47 counts for Morse, Briel, and remaining co-defendants. Jurors later described feeling sick about the systematic targeting of rural property owners by criminals who'd assumed working people couldn't fight back against well-funded legal warfare. Asset forfeit orders promised $8.2 million for victim compensation, while federal sentencing guidelines suggested decades in prison for enterprise leaders who'd terrorized innocent families across multiple states. Courthouse steps press conference featured me flanked by federal prosecutors and FBI agents as I delivered a statement that would be quoted in property rights legislation for years. This victory belongs to every American who believes working families deserve to own land without interference from criminals with law degrees and superiority complexes. National media interviews followed with requests from property rights organizations, rural advocacy groups, and congressional committees investigating systematic fraud targeting rural Americans by organized criminal enterprises. Community reconciliation men immediately as former enemies approached with apologies and offers of friendship. HOA board dissolution eliminated the organization entirely, while homeowners voted to purchase legitimate easements for fair market value, creating the peaceful coexistence that should have existed from the beginning. Joint statements emphasized that residents and I were all victims of criminals who'd exploited community divisions for personal profit, turning neighbors against each other while stealing from everyone involved. That taste of victory, mixed with exhaustion as I realized the fight was finally over. Justice had prevailed and grandfather's land would remain in our family forever, protected by federal law and community support. That couldn't be destroyed by California criminals with expensive lawyers and criminal ambitions. Victory tasted sweeter than Christmas morning when federal asset forfeit delivered $2.3 million from criminal proceeds straight into my account, while sheepish HOA homeowners paid another $850,000 for legitimate easements on land their houses had been stealing for years. Legal fees vanished under federal victim compensation, and my construction company begged me to become partner after watching me survive organized crime warfare that would crush most men. But the real treasure wasn't money. It was watching my grandson learn to fish from the same dock his great-grandfather built on land that would belong to our family forever, protected by federal precedent stronger than any criminal's law degree. Community healing began with hammers and friendship as volunteers rebuilt Ezra's dock, using his original 1987 blueprints, while the garden got replanted with heritage tomatoes and apple trees. That symbolized roots too deep for criminals to poison. The cabin renovation preserved its rustic soul while adding modern security that could detect trouble from 3 counties away. And a new guest cabin housed visiting property rights advocates who made pilgrimages to the spot where David used federal prosecutors instead of stones to slay Goliath. The sound of children's laughter replaced midnight chainsaws as former enemies became friends over barbecue and shared stories about surviving sophisticated con artists. Our annual Penridge Property Rights Festival exploded into a 2-0-person celebration featuring food trucks, bluegrass bands, and enough American flags to make eagles weep with patriotic joy. Former HOA residents organized events alongside longtime locals, while Constance's old infinity pool got converted into a community fish pond that kids love and adults find hilariously symbolic. Floyd's basement war room became our emergency preparedness center. Dolores's hardware store transformed into unofficial property rights headquarters, and my nightmare became everyone's inspiration for protecting what matters most: family land and community bonds that criminals can't destroy. Legal legacy grew beyond Montana when Marcus' law spread to 8 states within 2 years, creating ironclad protections for rural property owners facing systematic fraud by criminal enterprises disguised as legitimate businesses. My congressional testimony helped pass the Federal Rural Property Rights Protection Act, with bipartisan support that proved Democrats and Republicans agree on one thing: criminals shouldn't steal working families' land using fancy law degrees and unlimited funding. Enhanced FBI rural crime divisions received massive budget increases to investigate property fraud schemes, while my case became a precedent protecting countless Americans who'd never heard of adverse possession or RICO prosecutions. Personal transformation included marrying Sarah, a widow who'd attended my trial as a property rights advocate and understood that protecting family legacies was sacred work worth dedicating your life to completing. Stress-related health problems disappeared as community support and purposeful activism replaced fear and isolation, while my relationship with adult children healed completely through shared mission of protecting vulnerable Americans from predatory criminals. New purpose emerged: educating rural property owners about legal rights while helping victims fight back against sophisticated fraud schemes designed to steal generational wealth from honest families. Educational initiatives flourished with Ezra's Legacy Fund scholarships, sending rural kids to law school, university partnerships creating property rights legal clinics, and speaking tours reaching 47 states with presentations about protecting the American dream from organized crime. Online resources helped over 10,000 property owners annually, while FBI statistics credited my case with preventing $50 million in property fraud by disrupting copycat operations across multiple states. 23 similar criminal enterprises got shut down using tactics developed during my legal battle, proving that one man's victory could protect thousands of families nationwide. The ripple effect continues expanding as documentary film The Cabin That Couldn't Be Stolen wins awards and inspires legislation, while national property rights organizations recognize rural Americans fighting back against systematic exploitation by wealthy criminals. My grandson promises to always protect our land during fishing lessons using tackle his great-grandfather carved during Montana winters, while Sarah's pregnancy announcement means a 4th generation will grow up on ancestral soil that nobody can ever steal again. 5 years later, sunrise over Penridge Lake reminds me daily that Ezra would be proud watching his legacy inspire protection for rural Americans nationwide. The permanent Penridge Property Rights Center bears my name while serving families facing similar criminal attacks. And every victory makes our entire community stronger against predators who target working people. Share your HOA nightmare story in the comments. Your experience might save someone else's family legacy from destruction. Hit that subscribe button on HOA Stories for more tales about ordinary Americans fighting extraordinary battles for their rights. And remember, property rights are human rights, and every acre we defend makes criminals think twice about targeting our neighbors. That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA Stories. If you enjoyed watching Karma in Action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA madness, too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA meltdown we post. Be sure to 73 ha 9 YC equals MB6 Kiv 3 for OVKAS 5.